After years of living under our HOA's iron fist, they finally crossed the line by increasing my fees over having too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying up the neighborhood properties for years, and now it was time to show Karen, our power-hungry HOA president, who really owned this community. But would she accept defeat gracefully when I revealed my secret? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I never wanted trouble with our HOA. I didn't. But when I found that bright orange notice taped to my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this was war. My hands were shaking as I read it. Immediate HOA fee increase, $500 monthly, violation, excessive vehicles on property, 3 cars. That's what this was about. My work truck that I need for my construction business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shifts, and the used Honda we'd bought for our daughter's 16th birthday last month. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. I watched through my kitchen window as Karen Mitchell, our HOA president, did her morning inspection walk with her little pink clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures again. This was the 3rd time this week. "Honey, she's out there again," my wife Sarah called from the living room. "Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage." "No," I said firmly, pouring my coffee. "We're not hiding our daughter's car like we're doing something wrong. The garage is full of Sarah's medical supplies and my work equipment, exactly like we explained at the last HOA meeting." That meeting. I couldn't stop thinking about how Karen had smirked when I tried to explain our situation. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you." What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been quietly buying up properties in our development for the past 5 years through my real estate investment company. Every time a house went up for sale, I made sure to use different LLC names for the purchases. It started as a smart investment strategy, but now it had become something more. I walked outside to get the mail, purposely taking my time. Karen pretended to inspect Mrs. Johnson's rose bushes while watching me from the corner of her eye. Poor Mrs. Johnson had been fined last month for having roses that were too vibrant and disrupting neighborhood color harmony. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. "Property closing complete. You now own 67% of the development." I smiled, tucking the phone away as Karen power-walked toward me, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, her voice sickly sweet, "I trust you received our notice about the vehicle violation." "I did, Karen, and I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase." I kept my voice calm and professional. She waved her hand dismissively. "The board has full authority to implement fees as needed. Perhaps if you attended more meetings, you'd understand how these things work." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Little did she know I'd attended every single meeting for the past 5 years through proxy representatives who owned the other houses. I'd sat back and documented every one of Karen's selective enforcements, every questionable fee, every abuse of power. As she turned to leave, her designer heels clicking on the sidewalk, she called over her shoulder, "Oh, and the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight. 7 p.m. sharp. We'll be discussing additional measures about problem properties." I watched her walk away, then pulled out my phone again to text my lawyer. "Time to prepare those documents we discussed. Karen's making her move tonight." My daughter's car pulled into the driveway just then, and I saw Karen stop to take more photos. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. Tonight would change everything in this neighborhood, but first I had some calls to make. I went inside and spread out the property maps on my desk, each lot carefully highlighted and coded. 5 years of careful planning, of building evidence, of watching Karen's reign of HOA terror grow worse. Tonight she would learn that her biggest mistake wasn't just targeting my family, it was underestimating exactly who she was dealing with. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson from across the street, crying about another violation notice. As I listened to her story, I glanced at the framed photo on my wall. My father, standing proud in front of his first house before an HOA's harassment had forced him to sell at a loss 20 years ago. Dad had taught me to play the long game, to fight smart instead of angry. I looked at my watch. 6 hours until the meeting. Karen wanted to play hardball over a few cars in a driveway. She had no idea what was coming. What she didn't understand was that every property purchase had been strategic. When the Hendersons moved to Florida, I bought their house through Sunset Holdings, LLC. When the young couple on Maple Street got divorced, I purchased through Riverside Properties, Inc. Each transaction was completely legal, properly documented, and totally invisible to Karen's small-minded focus on measuring grass heights and counting cars. I walked into the community center's meeting room and immediately felt the tension. Every seat was filled with neighbors I'd known for years, sitting shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves. Karen had really outdone herself this time. She'd even hired a professional photographer to take pictures of my driveway from different angles, making 3 normal-sized cars look like some kind of illegal parking lot. "Let's begin," Karen announced, tapping her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She'd called this emergency meeting on a Tuesday evening, knowing full well that most working families would struggle to attend. But I'd made sure to be there, sitting quietly in the back row, watching her put on her usual show. "As you can see from these professional photographs," she began, clicking through her PowerPoint presentation, "Mr. Thompson's property has become a used car lot." A few gasps came from her loyal followers in the front row, the same ones whose Christmas decorations stayed up until March without any fines. I glanced around the room, noting how Mrs. Rodriguez, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd been fined last month for having her grandson's car in her driveway while he helped repair her roof. Mr. Chen, the high school science teacher, was furiously taking notes. He'd received a violation notice for parking his car slightly over his own driveway line during the last snowstorm. Karen clicked to the next slide, showing a zoomed-in photo of my daughter's car. "This vehicle here has been parked in the same spot for over 48 hours. She failed to mention it was because my daughter was home from college for the weekend. The meeting dragged on as Karen presented her evidence. Charts showing supposed property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, probably her friends, and even weather reports suggesting my cars were creating excess snowdrifts on the street. "Furthermore," she continued, pulling out a thick binder, "I've documented every instance of vehicles entering and leaving Mr. Thompson's property over the past 3 months." My eyebrows shot up. She'd been tracking my family's movements. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's when Sarah Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, stood up. "Karen, isn't this a bit excessive? They're just regular cars in a regular driveway." Karen's face reddened as she snapped, "You're out of order." "You haven't been recognized by the chair." I watched as Karen's husband Bob started handing out copies of a new proposed bylaw, one that would limit each household to 2 vehicles and require garage parking only. The absurdity of it all almost made me laugh. Almost. "We'll now vote on the new vehicle restrictions and fee increase," Karen declared, not even bothering to allow discussion. "All in favor?" That was my cue. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. "Point of order, Madam President." Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked at me over her reading glasses. "You're not recognized, Mr. Thompson." "Actually," I said, pulling out my own folder, "according to HOA Bylaw Section 7.3, any property owner may raise a point of order regarding voting procedures." The room fell silent. I could see Karen's perfectly manicured nails gripping the podium tighter. "Before we vote, I believe it's important to review the HOA's current property ownership structure." I started walking toward the front of the room, my shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. "You see, Over the past 5 years, Sunrise Properties has been acquiring homes in this development. Karen's face started to lose its color as I pulled out a large property map. And as CEO of Sunrise Properties, I thought it might interest everyone to know exactly who owns the majority of this HOA. I paused, making eye contact with each board member. But perhaps we should discuss that after we review these questionable surveillance activities you've been conducting. The room erupted in murmurs. Through my peripheral vision, I could see phones coming out, neighbors recording every moment. Karen's hand trembled as she reached for her water bottle, knocking over her precious gavel in the process. And that's when Bob rushed to the podium, whispering something in Karen's ear. Her eyes widened as she finally realized who she'd been messing with all these years. I unfolded the property map across the table, each lot color-coded and labeled. "These green properties," I said, pointing to 37 houses scattered throughout our development, represent 67% of Willowbrook Estates, all purchased legally through various LLCs over the past 5 years. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of camera phones recording. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Mrs. Mitchell," I continued, "you've been harassing the majority property owner of this HOA for the past 3 months over 3 perfectly legal vehicles." I pulled out a thick binder of my own. "But let's talk about some real violations, shall we?" The first document I placed on the projector was a bank statement. This shows $53,000 in mysterious landscaping fees from last summer. Yet as we can all see, the common areas still have dead grass and broken sprinklers. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up from her seat. "I knew something was fishy. We never got any landscaping improvements." More neighbors started speaking up, their voices overlapping. "Where did our money go? We've been asking about the pool repairs for months." Karen's face was turning red, then pale, then red again. "This is inappropriate," she stammered. "This meeting is about parking violations." "Actually," I said, pulling out another document, "this meeting is about abuse of power. Here's security footage from 3 a.m. last Tuesday." I clicked to the next slide, showing grainy video of Karen using a measuring tape on my driveway in the middle of the night. The room gasped. And here's footage from 2 weeks ago, showing Mrs. Mitchell entering the Chen family's backyard without permission to photograph their garden shed. Mr. Chen jumped up from his seat. "That's why my dog was barking. You were trespassing on my property." But I wasn't done. Now, about selective enforcement. I displayed a split-screen photo showing Karen's friend Patricia's driveway with 4 cars and my driveway with 3. These photos were taken on the same day. Mrs. Patterson has had 4 vehicles for 6 months. No violations, no fees, no harassment. Karen's allies in the front row were now staring at her with confusion and anger. "And here," I continued, "is documentation showing that board member Janet Stevens has been running an unlicensed daycare from her home for 2 years, in direct violation of our residential zoning bylaws. Yet somehow, she's never received a single citation." The final blow came when I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. Karen's voice filled the room. "These people don't belong in our neighborhood anyway. If we make it expensive enough, they'll move somewhere more suitable for their income level." It was from a board meeting 3 months ago that I'd attended via proxy. The room erupted in angry voices. Mrs. Rodriguez was shaking her head in disgust. Mr. Chen was demanding Karen's resignation on the spot. Even some of Karen's longtime supporters looked horrified. Karen tried to regain control, banging her gavel frantically. "This is all taken out of context. Mr. Thompson is trying to distract from his clear violations." But her voice was shaking, and sweat was beading on her forehead. That's when my lawyer, Michael Rodriguez, whom I'd asked to attend as a witness, stood up from the back row. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I'm Michael Rodriguez from Rodriguez and Associates. I've been documenting HOA violations on behalf of my client for the past year. He walked to the front with his own briefcase. What you're witnessing tonight is not just parking harassment, but systematic embezzlement, illegal surveillance, selective enforcement, and violation of multiple state housing laws. He placed a legal document on the projector. This is a cease and desist order regarding the unlawful surveillance of Mr. Thompson's family. Mrs. Mitchell, you've been stalking this family, entering their property without permission, and documenting their private movements. This constitutes criminal harassment under state law. Karen's face went white as a sheet, but Michael wasn't finished. We've also filed complaints with the State Attorney General's office regarding the missing landscaping funds and the discrepancies in HOA financial records. He pulled out bank statements. $53,000 in landscaping fees, but the contracted company has no record of any work performed in this development. However, we do have records of a $50,000 home renovation loan taken out by Mrs. Mitchell the same week these fees were collected. The room exploded. Neighbors were shouting questions, demanding answers. Someone yelled, "She stole our money!" Another voice called out, "We want our fees back!" Karen stood behind the podium, clutching it for support, her designer outfit now wrinkled and her perfect hair falling out of place. "There's more," Michael continued. "We have documentation of 17 families who were unfairly fined, harassed, or forced to make unnecessary property modifications based on selectively enforced or completely fabricated rules." He gestured to a stack of folders. Mrs. Johnson's rose garden violation. Roses being too vibrant is not a legitimate HOA restriction. Mr. Chen's parking violation for being 2 inches over his own property line during a snowstorm, legally unenforceable. The Martinez family being fined for children's toys in their own backyard, a clear violation of their property rights. Then came the most damaging evidence. Michael played security footage on his laptop, projecting it for everyone to see. This is from Mrs. Patterson's Ring doorbell camera, showing Mrs. Mitchell and board member Janet Stevens laughing about getting rid of the undesirable families while drinking wine on Mrs. Patterson's porch. Karen's voice was clear on the recording. "If we can't keep them out, we'll price them out. These working-class families are ruining our property values." Karen finally found her voice, but it came out as a croak. "This is a witch hunt. These people are trying to destroy me because I maintain standards." But as she spoke, her phone started buzzing incessantly. Someone in the crowd called out, "Channel 7 News is outside. They want to interview neighbors about HOA corruption." Karen's eyes went wide with panic. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, Karen submitted her resignation letter, though she couldn't resist one final petty move. Her resignation email, which she CC'd to the entire neighborhood, read, "I am resigning from the HOA board due to harassment from big money interests who want to turn our beautiful community into a low-income housing project. I hope you're all happy when your property values plummet." Even in defeat, she couldn't take responsibility for her actions. The State Attorney General's investigation moved quickly. Karen was ordered to repay $53,000 in misappropriated funds, plus interest and penalties. The investigation also revealed that she'd been using HOA money for personal expenses for over 2 years, including that Hawaii vacation she'd posted about on social media with the caption, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this getaway." But the best part was watching the neighborhood transform. Our first order of business as the new HOA board was reversing all of Karen's ridiculous rules. Kids could play basketball in their driveways again. Mrs. Johnson's roses were celebrated, not criminalized. The Martinez family's children could leave their toys in their own backyard without fear of harassment. Mr. Chen could park wherever he wanted on his own property. We implemented real improvements, too. That $53,000 Karen had to repay went toward actual landscaping, fixing the community pool she'd claimed was being renovated for years, and installing proper lighting on our walking trails. Property values did increase by 15% in the first 6 months after Karen left. Turns out, when people aren't afraid of arbitrary fines and harassment, they actually take better care of their homes. The new HOA board included Mrs. Rodriguez as president, Mr. Chen as treasurer, and Sarah Jenkins as secretary. We kept the rules simple. Maintain your property reasonably, don't disturb your neighbors, and treat everyone with respect. No measuring tapes at 3 a.m. No surveillance of families. No targeting people because you don't think they belong. 6 months later, I got a call from a neighborhood 2 towns over. They'd heard about our story and wanted advice. Apparently, Karen had moved there and within weeks was already measuring grass heights and taking photos of driveways. She's trying to get herself elected to our HOA board, the caller told me. Can you help us? I laughed and gave them my lawyer's number. Some people never learn. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice. Karen thought she could bully families out of their own neighborhood, steal their money, and hide behind a clipboard and a gavel. But she forgot that communities are made up of real people with real lives, not just properties to control. Today, our neighborhood is thriving. Children play in driveways, neighbors help each other, and no one's afraid to come home to an orange violation notice. And Karen? Well, let's just say her new neighbors are a lot more prepared for her tactics than we were. Sometimes the best way to stop a bully is to simply shine a light on what they're really doing. If you're dealing with an HOA Karen in your neighborhood, document everything, know your rights, and remember, they work for you, not the other way around. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served.